Part 4 of Chapter P notes. This is all about factoring, and this is probably the most important thing you will learn all semester. So make sure you play this over and over until you get it. It's really, really important. So the very first thing that you want to do when factoring something or factoring a polynomial is to factor out the greatest common factor. That means what factor does each term have in common? Well, looking at these two, I can see that they both have a 3 and an x in common. So we're going to factor that 3x out. Well, what do you multiply by 3x to get 6x squared? You multiply it by 2x. And what do you multiply by negative 3x to get 3x? You multiply it by negative 1. You can always check factoring problems by multiplying it back out. 3x times 2x is 6x squared, and 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. As long as what is inside the parentheses has nothing in common, then it's completely factored. So have a look at this one. You immediately see the 10 and the 25 and think, oh, they have 5 in common. But this one doesn't have a 5, so that's not in common. These two have x's in common, but this one does not. But they all do have a y, so you factor that y out. When you do that, you're left with x squared plus 10x plus 25. For now, this is completely factored. In just a few minutes, you'll see that it's really not, and you'll find out how to factor it further. But for now, we'll leave it as that. This third example is a little bit different, but it's still the same idea. You have something multiplied by a binomial. This is considered one term. This is considered one term. What do they have in common? They have x plus 6 in common. So factor minus 6. Factor x minus 6 out. If you factor that out of this one, you're left with x. And if you factor it out of this one, you're left with this plus 2. This one is now completely factored. So that's greatest common factor. The next thing you want to do is figure out what kind of polynomial you have. Do you have a binomial? And if so, does it look like this one or this one? This is called difference of squares. This one is called difference of cubes. You can also have a sum of cubes, but you cannot have a sum of squares. Well, you can have it, you just can't factor it for now. Do you have a 4-term polynomial? You have 4 terms here. That will tell you to factor it in another way. Or do you have a trinomial? And if you have a trinomial, is your a equal to 1? By the way, in a trinomial, the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So when I say is a equal to 1, I'm talking about this coefficient. Here a is 1, but here a is 4, and here a is 6. So depending on what a is equal to, you will factor it differently. What about when you're factoring a binomial? Well, if you have difference of squares, it's pretty easy. You're going to have 2 small sets of parentheses. What do you square to get 25x squared y to the 4th? You have to square 5x y squared. What do you square to get 1? After you do that, you just put a plus and a minus. This one's completely factored. That's called difference of squares. Now, if you have the sum or the difference of cubes, something different happens. So the first thing that I want you to do is figure out, what do you cube to get the first term? What do you cube to get the second term? Let's figure that out first. What do you cube to get 8x to the 6th y cubed? Well, to get 8, you cube the 2. To get x to the 6th, you cube x squared. And to get y cubed, you cube y. So what do you cube to get z to the 9th? You cube z cubed. So that's what we're going to use, this stuff in red, for when we fill in our parentheses. You have a short set and a long set. So the first thing you do is figure out what you cube to get the first term, put it here. What do you cube to get the second term? Put it here. This sign goes here. Now, you take the first one or whatever you cube to get the first term and you put it here and you square it. What is 2x squared y all squared? It's going to be 4x to the 4th y squared. So that's what you put here. What do you get when you square z cubed? You get z to the 6th. Okay? In the middle, you multiply these two together. 2x squared y times z cubed is 2x squared y z cubed. This sign is always plus, no matter what. This sign is always opposite this sign. So if this had been a plus, this would be a minus. Since this is a minus, this will be a plus. This is completely factored. What if you have a 4-term polynomial? Later we're going to learn really detailed ways to factor these. For now, you want to factor by grouping. You put together the first two terms and you put together the last two terms. What do the first two have in common? They both have an x squared, so factor that out. You factor an x squared out of an x cubed and you get an x, and you factor it out of 2x squared and you get a 2. What do the last two have in common? They have a positive 5 in common, and if you factor out that positive 5, you end up with an x and a plus 2. Now what do these two have in common? They both have that x plus 2 in common, so factor that out. And when you factor x plus 2 out of the first one, you're left with x squared. When you factor it out of the second one, you're left with 5. This is completely factored for now. Now we have a trinomial. Remember whenever you were working with these before? Let me see if I can change my color really fast. If you have something like x plus 1 times x minus 2, and you multiply it out, you get x squared minus 2x plus x minus 2. And then combine like terms, x squared minus x minus 2, you end up with a trinomial. So whenever you factor a trinomial, you're trying to go back to what it was before you multiplied it out. That's pretty much what factoring is unmultiplying it. So if a is equal to 1, like this one, a is 1, just look at your last term. Find all the factors of 18. So 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. But since this is a positive 18, you could also have negative 1 and negative 18, negative 2 and negative 9, negative 3 and negative 6. Now these are factors. We're talking about multiplying them to get a positive 18. Looking at all of these, you want to find a pair that will add up to give you this middle term. Do any of these add up to give you positive 10? They don't, right? If that's the case, you would just say it's prime. This is a prime polynomial. However, what if it looked like this? What if this were an 11x? This 2 and 9 would add up to give you a positive 11, right? So, you're going to put your x's in there to get this x squared. And for the 11, you put in the positive 2 and the positive 9. So what happens if we multiply this out? Here's x squared, that's this one. You're going to have 9x and 2x. When you add those, you get 11x. 2 times 9 is 18. So what if your leading coefficient is not a 1? Then you have to do what's called the AC method. Remember whenever we were talking about trinomials, I said that the standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c? The AC method comes from AC, right here. So in this case, you want to multiply a and c together. AC is equal to 4. Write down the factors of that number. So 1 times 4, 2 times 2. But since it's a positive 4, you could also have negative 1 times negative 4 and negative 2 times negative 2. Which of these will add up to give you a negative 4? It would be these two. So what you want to do is split this middle term into those two terms, a negative 2x and a negative 2x. Bring down everything you didn't use. So 4x squared and positive 1. Now you have 4 terms you can factor by grouping. What do the first two have in common? They have a 2x in common. When you factor that out of the first two, you're left with 2x minus 1. What do the last two have in common? They don't really have anything in common. So you definitely want to factor out a 1. But almost every time that's a negative, you're going to factor out a negative 1. When you factor out a negative 1, doesn't it change all these signs? And you end up with a positive 2x and a negative 1? Let's see. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Okay, so now it's factored. We continue to group it. What do those two have in common? They both have the 2x minus 1 in common. If you factor it out of here, you're left with 2x. And if you factor it out of here, you're left with negative 1. You could leave it like this, but since they're the same, you can also write it like this. 2x minus 1 all squared. Either of those answers is correct. So we need to do that on that very last problem. We need to multiply 6 times negative 15. Wow, that's going to be a big number, isn't it? That's going to be negative 90. That's your AC. You want to find the factors of negative 90 that add up to a negative 1. You could list all of them out. I happen to know it off the top of my head, amazingly. So we have negative 9 times 10. That will give us the negative 90, and if you add them, you get a positive 1. So split the middle term into negative 9x and positive 10x. Bring down the 6x squared and bring down the negative 15. Group them. The first two have a 3x in common. When you factor it out, you're left with 2x minus 3. Oops, that's not supposed to be squared. There we go. And these two have a 5 in common, so I have to put that on 2 lines. 5 times, and if you factor 5 out of these, you're left with 2x minus 3. Now what do these two have in common? They both have 2x minus 3. When you factor that out of this one, you're left with 3x. And when you factor it out of this one, you're left with 5. This is now completely factored.